Hello everyone and welcome back. I am so excited. This is session number 2 today as part of our typography themed event happening today and tomorrow. And I'm thrilled to welcome back our good friend Roch from Foundry. How are you?
I'm great, Tom. Hello. Hello,
Hello,
everybody.
it's great to see you again. I was talking about you on the last session about 30 minutes ago, and I was saying you're one of my favorite type designers, and I just love your attention to detail. Very meticulous in everything you do, and the details of your fonts just blow my mind.
You're always so kind, Tom. Thank you very much. I think I just love what I do, so I'm happy that you like the outcome.
Absolutely, absolutely. What are we going to be learning today with the Design Cuts community?
Today I'll talk about pairing fonts for projects, and I will start my session, let's say, from telling few things about what to look at when you are choosing a font. Then I will talk about what to look when you are choosing more than one font, how to compare the fonts, and what are important aspects of typography that you need to take into considerations. And later I will show some examples and analyze them in terms of font pairing and watching the details of the typography, how all the things work together, and how to manage it to not be overwhelmed by making some difficult decisions. It's not so difficult. So
Perfect.
Okay, shall I start? Yes.
Please take it away.
Okay. For the beginning, because today's session is about font pairing, so choosing more than one font for the project and making this set of fonts working very nice. But for the beginning, I would like to tell a few words about choosing not so many fonts for the design, especially when somebody is not experienced or somebody does not feel very comfortable with choosing fonts. For the beginning, the best idea is to start from using just one font and making the project work with one font. And the main question is, why do we need to use more than one, or what purpose does it serve? And the main answer for this is hierarchy in our design, to make to differentiate the more important things or titles or some quotations, some parts that we want to target the site on. And you don't really need different font to achieve this goal. So I will start to share my screen right now and just show you a couple of examples. So here I prepared for you just a couple of examples from Swiss School of Design, from marvelous designers. And they were using very minimalistic approach to achieve a hierarchy in design. And as you can see, they used very, very minimalistic typography, and the design, the whole design is very minimalistic, but everything is extremely clean. Everything is extremely well readable. And what they used, it's very simple. They used like one font. Here we have really two fonts. I will talk a bit later about this, because we have a bold version of font and a regular text version of font, a bit lighter. And they used just the size, bold versus regular, and spacing, and color, and a bit of color, and it makes the titles very, very clear. Everything is just so perfectly aligned here. So even here, this is a very nice example. Even if you have the same size of the font, when you change the color for different color than all the other things on the poster, you just immediately know that this part is the most important. Okay, let's go a little bit, see a little bit more. As you can see, these designs are really interesting. They are very graphical and at the same time extremely minimalistic, very simple use of typography in terms of fonts. They are very minimal fonts and not used in conjunction with any other fonts. I wanted to start from this because I wanted you to understand the purpose and to have a feeling how to achieve the goal in our designs. And then by choosing more than one font for the design is like our luxury, but we don't really have to do that. And these layout features will be very, very important when choosing also the parts of fonts when using more than one font. These layout features are very, very important in our design. And last is my copy of Josef Müller-Brockmann's poster with one of my fonts. This was prepared for another live session here for Design Cuts. And I really love this poster, how with just two fonts from the same family, everything is so greatly structurized. I just had to recreate it and to play a little bit with this design.
I feel it's so soothing for the eye.
Yes, me too. I love it. And having so much density, so big density of information on one page, one can make it very clear, very obvious what it is all about, and one does not have to use a lot of fonts to achieve this goal. And if you are able to do such a thing with 1-2 fonts, you can do everything with 1 or 2 fonts. And okay, this was my introduction, and I'm not telling you that it's better to use 1 or 2 fonts. Nothing like this. I'm just telling it's a great idea first to feel more comfortable, to first go a little bit deeper in the design using very simple tools. And then when you add another tools, more fonts, you will have a much bigger ease of use, let's say, ease of use of these tools. I wanted to stress that everything that I will tell today, these are not rules. This is not a part of any particular design school. These are just ideas and practical tips on how to make your work with fonts much easier, as everything connected with fonts, associated with fonts, and with design generally, finally is optical. It has to look good. It has to just be harmonious, work nice, and all the things that I will tell you in a moment are just elements that can help you achieve this goal. But remember, at the end, your eye is very, very important. So just these rules that yes, these tips will not be rules, and please don't treat them like that, because rules just can make you more stressed and
Constrain you.
tight and constrained. Yes, in your work, and it's not what we want to achieve. We want to achieve more freedom in the design and more effortless feel in it. Okay, so to go further, here I wanted to just tell you a couple of things what is important in type for type design, for what will you look for when you will be choosing a font, apart of letter forms, because of course everybody sees the shapes of the letters and we think, okay, these shapes are nice, it will look very, very, very cool in my new design. But these are other things that really are so much important when you are using font, that you need to take into consideration when choosing the font and how you will set it in your design. So spacing and kerning, this is horizontal spacing between your letters. Even if the font is made very well, if you use very professional, great looking font, sometimes for your particular design, it may be a good idea to make these spaces a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. General rule of thumb with spacing is that for titles, for bigger sizes of text, we use smaller spacing, narrower spacing. And for small text, for big paragraphs of text, we use bigger spacing just to have more readable and legible text. So this is very important thing. Second thing is leading. When you set the paragraph of text or even title that has, for example, 2 lines, it's very important to really watch if the lines are not too close or too far from each other. I explain it very simplistically, but very often we just don't think about these elements, and because we are so much interested in how the letters look like. Another thing in the design is white space. Of course, all of you that design anything know how important is the space around your text and how much it influences everything, from the elegance of it, from the aesthetic point of view to legibility even. So this is also very important. Next thing is layout design. What I mean is, if we have very complex design, a lot of information or a lot of images, or very cluttered thing, or very minimalistic, because this is also very important for what kind of fonts we will choose. And last thing is, of course, mood, character of the design, because every font has its own mood also as well, and we have to think about it. These are just like a couple of things that we need to take into consideration before we start to think what kind of font we shall use for our design, for our project. What kind of project it is, what kind of font it will need, will the spacing be bigger or smaller? Because when you choose wrong these kind of things, it can ruin even good font pairing. You can have two nice fonts that work together well, but if the spacing is off, then you will have a feeling that the fonts don't work really well. Okay. Here, shortly, I will explain what to look for when you are pairing fonts. When you take two fonts, for example, what elements have influence on the optical harmony between them. So one thing, of course, is weight. If the font is thinner or more bold. The other thing is width of the font. So if the letters are wide or very narrow. Third thing is X height. This is the height of our letter X, really, a lowercase letter X. It changes drastically the perception of the font. If the letters are smaller, comparing to the to capital letters, or if they are taller. And I will tell a few words about this in a minute. Next things are if these are serif, sans serif, script fonts. If you choose sans serif, geometric or humanist. So geometric is kind of font that you see in here, and humanist is a font that is without serifs, but the shapes are more inspired by old serif fonts and handwriting. We take into considerations if we have modern or retro fonts, sharp or soft in terms of their corners, rounded corners or sharp corners. Of course, mood of the font, design details. This can be aperture. So if the endings of rounded forms are closed, like here, this is very small aperture in this font. The E closes very, very, very tightly. And in other fonts, the aperture where it's opened, there is a lot of white, more white space here between the endings of letters. And this can be a detail, for example, that can contrast between two fonts or can be similar between two fonts. This is the thing that we also observe and decide what will work better. Other things are spacing and text size. And here, all these elements can make a contrast in our font pairing or can make similarity in our font pairing. And that's the question, the main question, how you would like to pair your fonts. And this is my very practical and simple advice, especially for beginners.
Roch, just quickly before we get into how to do this, very interesting results in the poll. Nearly 80% of people live with us right now said they really struggle with how to do this.
Oh,
so I think we're about to help a lot of people.
Yes, so I'll try to speak as simply as I can to just give you some practical advice. So we have all these elements, and it's not really rocket science. It's not very complex thing. I just suggest to you to watch these elements, to observe them in different fonts. You will see how interesting similarities or differences between the fonts you can observe. And to have a really easy practical start, firstly, we need to come back to our question, why do we need our fonts? Why do we need many fonts or more than one font? To have a contrast, to have a hierarchy, and to make something more important on a page or in our design. That's why I suggest for the beginning to choose fonts that contrast with each other. This is it's one thing, it's easier to achieve the visual goal, and it also is easier to choose contrasting fonts that do not interfere with each other with similar but slightly different details that can look a bit off. And if you want to use similar fonts, you don't want to use too rich visual language in terms of typography, then my best advice is use a fonts from one type family or one type system. I will tell a few words in a minute about this. Let's go further. I mean, the best thing is when you will see some details. This is something that I started to talk about a minute ago. Start with the basics. When you want to feel more comfortable with font pairing, start from pairing fonts from one family. So, for example, like on these posters here, these are two fonts from one family. It's Montreal Classic, excuse me, and it's bold and normal. It creates contrast, but it works naturally and very effortless. These fonts with each other, they work very effortless. Other thing, choose fonts from one type system. I will tell in 1 minute what is type system to clarify this thing. Fonts from one designer. This is also a good idea because designers have their own design language, and even if the fonts are not from the same family, they always share some characteristics from this visual language of one designer. Every time there is something underneath that makes these fonts work a bit easier together when they are from one designer.
Yeah, it's like a style, right?
Yes, something. Even if designer makes a retro font and modern font, some elements
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
completely. And Matt, our creative director, he's live with us. He just said he finds Lutschine and Montreal an awesome combination, both fonts of yours, and I agree.
Yes.
And this is the combination I use in my personal brand, which we talked about. So I actually paired two of Roch's fonts in my own brand for my new website, the book I've worked on. Like, I put it across everything because they are the perfect pairing, because they both have your style and they both feel clean and balanced, and because they're a Roch font.
Yes, I'm very happy that you use them in your branding. And these two fonts are from one type system, what I will show you in a minute. And they were created with perfect matching to each other in mind. So they have a lot of small details that are very similar in both fonts, even if the overall proportions and character and goal for each font is different. Okay, then no, this layout design is probably my mistake. Sorry for this. Fonts from one period. This is also nice advice if you are going to use very modern font. So maybe the second one also should be modern. This is easier because they will have similar character. And and other situation when you choose a font from 19th century. Maybe it's nice to just use another from 19th century. They will have much more similar design and character. And the last from this list is very important, especially at the beginning, but this is really very important tip. Fonts should have at least one similar characteristic, something that will make them work together, something in common. Try to, even if you choose fonts that are very different from each other, there are so many characteristics of font that you always can find something that will merge these fonts and make them work well, even if they are very contrasting. And this is very important and makes your work much easier when you will watch this element. Just to watch the fonts to have at least one similar thing. It may be similar X height. It may be similar, for example, aperture, as I told you before. For example, this is Lutschine and Montreal have similar aperture. Some details in letter shapes, things like those. And this will make your design much more consistent. Okay, let's finish with these theoretical things. Here are just some examples of how can you merge, how can you choose two fonts to somehow make them contrast work for you. So sans serif and serif font. Display font, for example, narrow font, that is working very good for titles, and text font that is more legible. Light and bold, regular, upright font, and italic font. Very good part is finding some nice script, calligraphic script, for example, and elegant serif font. This works very well together. Another thing, script fonts look great with geometric fonts. This always works, or almost always. And if you want to go deeper, script, sans serif, and serif font, just to make much different fonts if you want to make contrast. Of course, it has to match the character of your design, because fonts are there to serve your main purpose, which is your design. But these are just simple examples. And here I titled it exercise, just a way how to develop your ability to use fonts. So for example, for the beginning, just try to design something with one font. Just don't differentiate anything in terms of font choice. Just choose one font and use your layout, use your white space, use the size of the font to make the contrast and to make everything work, to make it look good. Then choose one font but two weights, like in the designs above, bold weight and regular weight. Then you can choose two fonts from one family, then two fonts from one system, two contrasting fonts, then a bit more difficult, choose two more similar conservative fonts. This is more difficult to make them work good. And at the end, try to go crazy and design something with 3 or more fonts, which really is for more experienced persons.
Amazing.
That have this feeling. Yes, in one design, in the same design, try to design some poster or a page from a magazine and change this each time for more complex design. Okay. And the last slide really that is, this is slide showing an example of type system. So type system is a set of typefaces, type families that are designed in one language, that are designed in order to work with each other. So this type system that Lutschine is part of, we can see it here. So Lutschine is our it's our font for headlines mainly, but Lutschine itself is a very big family. It has many widths, so you can use it very narrow or quite normal, let's say. Even this one can be used for texts because it's not so narrow anymore. But generally, Lutschine is the headline font for us. Then similar in purpose is Conte. This font family, also as big as Lutschine, is much more playful because this font is unicase. So the uppercase letters are the same height as lowercase letters. This is much more playful character. Then we have our Montreal family, well known from design cuts, and this is a huge family of fonts with many different styles in it, but each of Montreal styles share the same proportions of letters, and the details of and similar spacing. The details of letters are different, but and the particular fonts have different character, but the overall design always fits together. And here we have Montreal branding. It's a crazy font for making logotypes and unconventional things. And here is a Rothorn geometric. It's a really working name. It's not ready font. It's work in progress, but it will also be a part of the whole type system, and it will be the geometric.
I like the teaser. That looks beautiful.
Yes. All the titles and the slides are written with Rothorn. This is
I was trying to think what font it was. It looked a little different. Beautiful.
Yes,
really beautiful in the lightweight as well.
Okay, so let's go to slides. These are examples how you can make a contrast and make two fonts work. I will just tell. This doesn't need really any explanation. This is one type family, two fonts, bold and regular, work perfect together. Here it's from my another family, Amphibia, narrow and wide font. They are different. They will serve different purposes, but there are many design aspects that are very similar, and they will work well together. But probably I would use the narrow for the titles and this one for the text. The narrow one would be bigger, and it would make a better contrast and look. Here's very simple Montreal grotesque, and only contrast is a color. Never forget about this possibility. It's a very strong tool. Here we have X height difference, and you can see this is Lutschine, and you can see if you have lower X height, font looks much different than when you have higher X height. Generally speaking, higher X height looks bigger, and that's why we use higher X height, especially when we set small text. It tends to be more legible. So this is also a nice tool if you have it in your font family or font system. And nice thing to remember when you set small text, go for a little bit bigger X height. The legibility will be better. Here we have two of my families, Teramo and Qualium text. This is an example of two fonts with serif and sans serif typeface. Here we have an example of geometric sans, also my two fonts, Boson and Qualion Text Italic. I took Italic to show even stronger the humanist valors of the font. It's not so wide, the strokes are not so uniform, and it looks much more organic, let's say. But also these two fonts are part of one type system, which is Qualion Boson, Qualion Round, Qualion Text. And they also share similar aperture, for example, and similar letter shapes, if you would take a closer look. Here, I choose completely different fonts, but all are retro fonts. Both fonts are recreations of old fonts found in old print materials from Poland. And they are completely different, but they are a bit softer on the edges. Both are softer, both have really characteristic retro letters, and this character makes them work together. Here we have a mood, friendly mood, like I wrote here, very rounded fonts, also contrasting strongly, but the rounded shapes make them work very well together. This is Kefir, one of my Kefir in English, yes, one of my newest fonts, and this is Qualion Round. It's very geometric font, but with strongly rounded shapes. It's very, very light and friendly.
So is that an example of similar fonts then?
No,
that you're pairing,
no,
there's still the contrast.
I will show you in a minute.
Because they're quite rounded, but obviously they're also quite different.
Yes, they are quite. But this is an example. All these examples, what I show here, have this one, let's say, rule, one thing in common, at least one thing in common. These are serif versus sans serif, but both are very sharp. Both have very sharp shapes and quite open aperture, for example, and are a little bit narrower. These letter shapes are very similar in nature. You can see the S in both fonts is from one root. These are both retro, and these are both friendly and rounded in character. And even if the X height or other things are contrasting between them, the character makes them work great together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they pair really nicely.
Here we have Conte Narrow and Lutschine from one design system. Really different fonts when you see this, but as I told before, similar characteristics. Both have flat sides of rounded forms, have similar endings of letters, similar shapes of A, for example, and many other letters. So they have this thing in common that also makes them more consistent together.
Roch, I have to say quickly,
yes,
I love how you're breaking this down as a process, because truthfully, and let me know in the chat if design cutters, you've done the same thing. I always pair my fonts just based on eye. I do it optically. And
yes,
I just cycle through loads and I think, oh, that looks kind of nice. That doesn't look so good. But here you're showing there's an actual science to this, down to the details, these design details, the straight lines on the rounded characters, all these things, you're much more intentional versus I just do it by happy accident almost.
Yes, and this is at the end, the eye is the most important, but before, if the thought goes before it, you will have much better results. When you have some idea, what do I need, then you will have a couple of fonts that makes this goal true, and then you choose from these fonts which looks best for you in this particular design, because this is also very important, the particular project. This is an example of Lutschine, but lowercase versus uppercase. This can also make a great contrast, and it's also a good idea very often to use just uppercase versus lowercase, and you have like two different fonts almost. Here is more or less what you use, Tom, for your branding. So Lutschine and Montre Grotesque.
It's nice to see it there. Same for Matt, I think, as well. Matt uses the same combination.
I use the same combination when I use them on Instagram. Sometimes some text elements. I like to use this combination very much. Here they are the same size, just for presentation, but usually you use display typeface in a bigger size and text typeface in a smaller size, and it adds even better optical effect.
So why do these pair so well? What's the reason behind those last two?
For these?
Yeah.
These are really made from the same shapes. Of course, these are rounded here, and these not. These have flat sides to make the font narrower. But a lot of shapes are very similar. I would have to show you similar letters. In this example, they are not a lot of them. But for example, both of these typefaces have closed aperture. So the endings go straight to the bottom. Both have really small details like cut corners. The corners in diagonal shapes are not going to the point, but they are cut to make the spacing a little bit easier. They are similar curves, for example, in Y, but for example here we don't have the font. But this kind of shapes.
So from your list of bullet points for how to pair fonts, in this case, it is the small details again that you think are the main reason why these pair so nicely.
Small details and aperture, and really what the type of drawing letters, let's say. These are really similar. For example, these endings here are the same in Lutschine, but we have not them here. But here is Lutschine. E, for example, it's closed. This is also closed. And let's see how F looks. Here and here. This line is very similar, but much more narrow.
Is there maybe a tip for people? Because when I'm trying to pair my fonts, and let's say I got a logo and a tagline, often I'll have the word for the logo and I'll have the actual text for the tagline, and then on both lines of text I will cycle through endless fonts and I'll try and find a pair. Are you suggesting maybe it's better to actually have the same text for both lines of text when you're going through font combinations, because that way you can see the exact same characters and see similarities, and that's going to highlight a better pairing?
Yes, that's great. Here I show you really these tend to look like small details. For example, look at this A, and in Lutschine the A, also the curve here is very similar, and closed aperture here. This looks like small details, but when you take small details in almost every letter and make them into whole sentences, there are tons of similarities then. But really, when I was drawing Lutschine, it was later than Montreal, it's newer font. I really took a lot of design cues from the Montreal. the apex from E, the letter M, N, capital letter M and N. These are really, really in very similar style. And the same you can say about the new font that I'm designing, ROHH, this geometric font. It's more round, it's wider, but also have these similarities with these other fonts.
I think you just demonstrated how to pair 3 fonts in that one slide.
And 3 fonts from one type system.
Yep.
It's very similar. Here you can see how size contrast works. And okay, we're here. So I will just show you real examples of pairing fonts in some project. I will show you the same size, the same page, the same page with different fonts and how different look you can achieve. I chose to make one big headline, one smaller headline, and text. Here we have just the new ROHH font that I'm designing, just a bold, light, and regular. And see how light and regular work here. They look as the same weight of font, because this one is much bigger. I chose it to be lighter and than this one. This is a book. This is a little bit fatter than this one. But when you put set the font in larger size, the lines look more bold, and that's why I choose this in light. And this is one good tip, I think. Also, we choose regular weights or book weights to set the text, the paragraph of text. And very often we choose bold weight for a title or lighter weight for a title, lighter than normal, light or thin, because in large sizes, these light weights can look really well. Because in small sizes, light weights are too thin and they are not very legible. But in large sizes, they look very attractive at times. And when you are pairing fonts and you are considering a font for a title, if it's a larger title, do not only take bold weights into consideration. Light weights are very elegant as well. And I will show you the same font in the same setting, but just one font. And this will be, here. Here I used only one weight and one font. If you set text in the right way, it looks very legible, very clean, and very elegant, really. You don't need to do anything more. You can, if you want more contrast, more visual attraction, you can do something like this. But really, this is enough, even with one font. Let's see different examples. Here we have Teramo Italic for a bigger title, Qualion Book for a smaller title, and Qualion regular for text, for paragraph of text. These fonts are contrasting very strongly. Teramo with Qualion. This is not only serif but italic also. But we have similar X height in these fonts, for example. Quite similar aperture in these letters, and they are both looking quite modern, even if Teramo is really inspired by old Italian fonts, but it's made to look very, very sharp and modern. And these are the similar things in these fonts, even if they are very contrasting. we can go much more feminine character, maybe, let's say, and delicate. This is my font Eckhart, Didone font with much more rounded shapes, and it works great with Montre Grotesque. Montre also a
This is
font
beautiful.
with, yes,
It looks like editorial, like a high-end magazine or something.
Yes. It's very, this Didon families, it look very, very nice for magazine design, and a nice grotesque minimalistic but rounded and elegant font looks perfect. And here, for example, let's see how I matched the weight of the title with the weight of the hairline in the Eckhart font. It also is the element that makes it work even better together. Okay, next one. Here is Kefir and Qualion round for titles. It's the pair that I showed you before in earlier examples. They are both very rounded and very, very friendly. But I chose boson for the text, which is not, which does not have rounded corners. I chose it to be more sharp and legible and very crisp, but it has the same proportions as Qualion because they are both from one type system. They have the same X height, the same aperture, similar letter forms, and they work great together. And even if I chose rounded fonts for titles, I chose, for example, here, sharp font for text to have a better legibility and crispness here.
I think great font pairing is like great editing in movies. You don't even know it's there almost. You just enjoy the outcome and it looks beautiful. And if it tweaks and it seems a bit odd, then obviously you got it wrong.
Yes. And really, it depends on approach, but of course, good design is not making this, not taking all your attention. Good design is just works, and you shouldn't notice it very strongly. Should be too much, but it depends on approach. Sometimes you want your design to shout, so this is also. Here we have Panorama inline, Panorama regular. So these fonts are just siblings, and Aloe, another retro font. Even if they're very different in proportion, the retro feel makes them work together very nice. And it's enough contrasting with these two to look good, because sometimes if you take not enough contrast, fonts tend to be too similar and really crash with each other a bit. Okay, just very fast. Here are two Montre fonts, Montre Informal and Montre Classic. Just you can see that they look almost as one font, even if letter shapes are much different, some letter shapes, but all the proportions are the same. Here you can see, then you can really go crazy sometimes, but also old script digitalized by me, and Panorama, which is very retro feel, which has very retro feel. It can work like this, but for this I chose only capital letters, just not to have too much, not too busy. But this is of course just experimental thing. Here you can see a very popular matching. Sans serif font for titles, serif font for text, and from the same, these are Teramo fonts. Teramo italic works very beautifully and makes different color than other fonts. These fonts have in common. They are very sharp and very modern, both Teramo and ROHH. That's why they work so good together. Here we have Montreal Classic and Eckhart. I decided to show you also that we can use text serif font with sans serif headlines, and this is an example how you can use very elegant thin headlines. And as you can see, always we need a lot of contrast between fonts, but always similar aspects. These shapes of Montreal Classic are very round and very feminine in some moments, and very subtle. And also Eckhart is very, very rounded and delicate font. That's why they work so nice together. Okay, last. This is Eckhart Color. It's very ornamental font, working with Qualion text italic and Eckhart text. I will not explain in so much detail. Just to go to the end, we can have very ornamental font with minimal font. It's Qualion italic with boson. They are both sharing the same proportions because they are from one type system. Here we have two Squarish fonts, for example. Here is very Squarish font for the title. Also,
this is so interesting, Roch, because some of these, especially the last one with the funky shapes, I would argue that these are quite bold typographic choices. You're not playing it safe. You're doing combinations which maybe would be quite intimidating and scary for most people, but they all work. All of these feel very balanced and like a good pairing.
Yes, and I wanted to show you, and that's why I have so many examples. I wanted to show you that really you can do thousands of things. I mean, I chose just fonts from my library, just my designs. So I didn't have a choice of thousands of fonts to make different emotions. But even from these ones that I designed, every design has a much different character. And you don't need, of course, it depends what you want to achieve, you know. If you have very ornamental or playful design, you can use this kind of font. Not for everything, but it can work really, really, really nice. Okay, I will just go through very fast. This is Squarish. So the common thing with these fonts is that they are quite square, both of them. These fonts are just also the same proportions, the same X height, very, very similar width, very similar letters. For example, E. This is also like one type system, Acque and Xingia. This is some more playful retro style, just to show you how you can choose much different fonts, but all with retro feel. This is Amphibia. It's very round. It's perfect for titles because it's very narrow. And here we have Kefir, which is mainly a display font, but in lighter weights, it looks really nice and really, really friendly in text sizes. So these rounded fonts also work really nice together. And this is another example of retro fonts. These are recreations of old Polish designs from newspapers. So it's Ganges Slab, Ganges Sans. So this is really the same font, but Slab and Sans, and Panorama. And for the last one, I chose again Lutschine with Montreal Grotesque, which is very very useful and very versatile pairing. And you can see how Lutschine is different when you use uppercase and lowercase versions of it. And it can also create two completely different colors. So that's all, a lot of examples. I hope you could somehow take something for you from them, and that you
Absolutely.
find it helpful in your future work.
It was so amazing. Thank you, Roch. Let's give it up for Roch in the comments, please, everyone, because that was an amazing session. We always love having you on.
Thank you very much.
I learned so much. Like I said, I've always just done this optically, and I've just gone through hundreds of fonts to try and find a pairing with no rhyme or reason and no intention behind it. So you're going to personally have helped me so much in the future when I'm trying to pair fonts.
Happy to hear that, Tom.
It was great.
Happy to hear that.
A huge thank you for joining me today. I want to encourage everyone as well. If you have not checked it out, I want you to do two things. First of all, check out the green button below us and take a look at Lutschine Narrow, which is currently on offer for 30% off. And also, if the team can link up Roch's entire store at DC, you just got a bit of an overview of quite how amazing his fonts are. So all of these typefaces and font families, they are enormous. There is a ton of weights. There's variable fonts. Basically, it is like a collection of my favorite fonts. If you go to Roch store, they're so beautiful. So please go check them out. They are incredibly, beloved by our community. And every time you release a new font, people are talking about it's like a modern classic, and it's as good as some of the great fonts of all time. So, please do go support Roch. Check out these fonts, and you will not regret them. They're incredible to use in your projects.
Thank you very much, and I highly recommend new Lutschine font. It's a great set and very affordable price for the set, and it's very versatile.
Perfect. Well, let us know if you grab it, if you use it. We can't wait to see your work. And I mean, I can't think of any better kind of testament to the quality than the fact that myself and Matt, our creative director, literally use it for our own personal brands. If you check us out on Instagram or my upcoming website, etc., this is literally my brand fonts that I use because I love it so much. So go check it out, and you'll be in good company. Roch also uses it regularly on his social media posts and so on.
Oh, and one thing, if somebody uses my fonts, please share with me your projects. I'm very happy to see how you use it.
So there's no better feeling, right?
Yes, and I'm very open. If you have any questions and or anything like this, go to my Instagram and DM me or just write somewhere in the comments.
Amazing. Well, Roch, thank you again. So glad to see everyone in the DC community loving this session. We actually have one more session today with James Martin starting in about 15 minutes. So I do need to go get ready for that. But please click the link in the chat, go register. And again, if you haven't yet, please go follow and support Roch on all platforms if the team can link that up again. And do go check out his incredible fonts. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I will see you in just 15 minutes with James. Thanks, Roch.
Yes.
Catch you soon, my friend.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.